Welcome back to Kaulig Nation, your one-stop shop for all things Kaulig Racing, Dinger Nation, SVG Nation, NASCAR, and more. Please take a moment to like the video, comment, subscribe, turn notifications to all to keep up to date with all of our content we got coming out. Your engagement really does help push our videos out more. We appreciate you all taking your valuable time to support the channel on the level you do. Don't forget to follow us on social media, on X, Twitter, whatever you're referring to it as this week. It's at Kaulig Nation. Over on Facebook, it's Kaulig Nation, Dinger Nation, and we have SVG Nation under construction currently. The question for this video for you SVG fans out there, with NASCAR adding an additional road course next season, do you think it's a given that SVG is going to win a race in the Cup Series during the regular season to automatically qualify for the playoffs? I think the likelihood of SVG pointing himself in next season is slim to none because of the learning curve that he has to go through, but you automatically qualify on a win. So the question is, do you think SVG in the Cup Series can bring home a win at Coda, Sonoma, Chicago, Mexico, Watkins Glen? He would have to win at one of those five places, or, maybe come up lucky on a super speedway. You never know what can happen. But can he win a race and make the playoffs next year? What's your confidence level like? Let us know down in the comment section below. In this video, we want to focus in on the Kaulig 31 ride. I had hopes that they hadn't decided on what was happening with that ride yet. But before we get into it, you look at Chandler Smith's situation. He's kind of up in the air. Zane Smith's situation. He's kind of up in the air. Harrison Burton may or may not be up in the air. I just feel like there are options out there that might have been better than what they end up going with. And it does appear they have a choice in mind. According to Brett Griffin from the DBC podcast, also former Kaulig Racing spotter, Kaulig Racing has their 5 full-time drivers next year locked in, which makes sense because on the Cup Series, we know AJ Allmendinger is going back Cup Racing. New partners supported that endeavor. We believe it's for multiple years as well, not just a one-off. And then they just signed Daniel Dye to what we believe is a multi-year deal. Daniel Dye has funding, so that's a good pickup. Josh Williams has 1 year left on his deal. And then we have the driver that will be announced tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. All signs seem to point towards Christian Eckes, which be a huge get for this organization. Big time prospect. Doesn't have funding, which is really his big issue. But sometimes you got to take a chance on guys in order to get talent into your organization, especially when you're struggling. If that does happen, we will have a video out shortly afterwards on that event. But back to the Kaulig 31 ride, Brett Griffin had mentioned that they have all 5 of the drivers locked up. Well, we just talked about 4 of them. That only leaves one guy left. He ruled out Harrison Burton. Zane Smith sounds like he's still trying for the FRM ride. Kevin Harvick earlier this week kind of, put the kibosh on that. Now, whether that's true or not remains to be seen. But to me, that leaves 3 candidates. Lee Spencer said earlier this week on Sirius XM that the Kaulig 31 driver would likely be someone who has a pre-existing relationship with a Kaulig partner. Well, that to me screams Ty Dillon. And there's a lot of people that are going to shit all over that pick. And I can honestly sit here and say, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but I am saying before we jump to conclusions, we should do our homework a little bit. And when you look at Ty Dillon starts side by side Daniel Hemrick when they've started the same race, Ty Dillon has outrun Daniel Hemrick this year. I'm not saying that's mega impressive, but it probably says more about Hemrick and how he's done this year than it does about Ty Dillon. And then the other option, which I still think falls under the criteria Lee Spencer mentioned, is Austin Hill. Kaulig flirted with Austin Hill last season, almost signed him. Ultimately, Austin Hill decided to remain at RCR. Austin Hill has some big time partners in United Rentals and Bennett. They would be super beneficial to Kaulig. Maybe Austin Hill comes up, and then Ty Dillon replaces Austin Hill in the Xfinity Series. That seems like the less likely route, even though for me personally, I'd rather Austin Hill in that ride than Ty Dillon in terms of the Kaulig 31 car. That being said, I don't know if Ty Dillon's really gotten a shot to be in equipment of this level for a full season when the 31 car is going good. I'm not saying Ty Dillon's going to make the playoffs or be a playoff threat, but I do feel like he'd be above 31st place in points, and we'll see what happens in regards to that. For me, it's really unfortunate because I I personally think Zane Smith, Chandler Smith, those guys are more attractive options than Austin Hill and Ty Dillon. It certainly seems like Ty Dillon is going to be the driver of that car. And then for Daniel Hemrick fans, like I hate it for them. The last thing I ever want to do is shit on someone else's favorite, especially if their future's in question and they don't know where they're going to be running, and it's way late in the game to lose your ride if that's what's happening. Even though I personally don't think Daniel Hemrick has earned another look in the Cup Series, funding matters, right? So and then there's the question, and this happens. It's a dog eat dog world sport. Circle could end up deciding to now they're a Daniel Hemrick sponsor, but they could essentially become a Kaulig sponsor, which would leave Hemrick in a very precarious position if he's no longer with the team. I'm not saying that's what is happening, but I do think you have to consider it for sure. Um, I think Daniel just, for me, he doesn't have any A tools. He's kind of like a C guy everywhere, but we'll end up seeing what happens. There is a lot of talk about a Kaulig satellite team of sorts, a car that Kaulig would prepare, would essentially be an unofficial teammate. I'm not talking about the Welcome One stuff either with RCR. I will talk about that in a future video, but it would, unofficially add another impressive prospect to the Kaulig staple, and we'll talk about more later on. Tomorrow morning, Kaulig has an announcement set to name their full-time Xfinity driver for the 16. Last week they named Daniel Dye, which caught some people off guard because Christian Eckes had been rumored for the ride. When they announced Daniel Dye, I think people assumed that Eckes was out and Kaulig had gone for the money, and Daniel Dye does bring funding. I believe it's a multi-year deal there. I'm not saying Daniel Dye isn't, a good driver. I think he's a quality prospect, but he's a long-term prospect for me. A guy that you're taking the long game approach. That maybe in 3 or 4 years he's in a Cup ride. Christian Eckes is a guy that might spend 1, maybe 2 years in your Xfinity program, and if you're willing to fund him or find him funding, probably going to be in one of your Cup cars. So if it is Christian Eckes that Kaulig has landed, it is a massive step in the right direction for this organization. One of the best prospects in NASCAR, some might argue the best prospect. And we'll have to wait and see what happens. They could get up at that podium tomorrow and name anyone else. But thanks to Matt Kaulig spilling the beans a little earlier this week on that it would be a Truck Series driver, the options are rather limited. And at this point, I'd be pretty stunned if it's not Christian Eckes. His season has been mega impressive this year, and we'll get into all that stuff tomorrow if he is the driver that is named. But the question is, who do you think gets named to the Kaulig 31 Cup Series car? Is it Ty Dillon's ride to lose? Does Daniel Hemrick still have a shot at it? Does it end up being Austin Hill? I have a hard time seeing it being anyone but one of those three. And if I had to, put odds on it, I would say Ty Dillon, Austin Hill, and then Daniel Hemrick. And we'll see what happens there. And then the Kaulig 16 car, who gets named to that tomorrow? Our money's on Christian Eckes. We'll see what happens. SVG news, by the way, tomorrow, which we'll have or it came out today, but we'll have in tomorrow's video. And it's not NASCAR related, but it sounds like he's going to race in a rather big event, supported by Trackhouse Racing. And we'll talk about that in tomorrow's video. Again, like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications to all to keep up to date with all of our content. And we will see you in the next video.